Hello there, singers. Welcome back to the weekly warm-up. I'm Laura, and if you're wondering why I'm so close up today, it's because we're going to talk about our tongues. Now, the tongue is a real troublemaker for many of us. It's often tightening up and getting in the way, and so today I just want to do a deep dive into do's and don'ts and just give you some general information about the tongue. And then in next week's video, I'm going to show you a series of exercises that you can use to reduce that tongue tension and also build some independence into your control of the tongue. So beginning with the do's and don'ts, and we're going to start with the most foundational do. And if you take nothing else away from this video, just employing this idea will improve your singing so much. And that is the idea of putting the tip of your tongue on the back of your bottom teeth. You've probably heard this from me before. I just want to be super clear about it. So first of all, what exactly do I mean? I mean the tip of the tongue against, and I mean touching, the back of the bottom teeth. So a couple of really common problems. I see a lot of this. That's your top teeth. Don't do that. We're putting it on the back of the bottom teeth. And you can see that my tongue is still fully inside of like the arc of my teeth. I am not doing. That is the tongue on top of the teeth. So again, exactly what I'm saying. Tip of the tongue against the back side, like against the enamel of the bottom teeth. Also, this only applies to vowels. So on consonants, you cannot keep the tongue there. You won't be able to make clear consonants. So I always like to think of the idea here of a parking space. If this is your bottom teeth and here's your tongue, we're keeping it touching here, and then it's going to move up for consonants and then just come right back to its touching parking space each time you're speaking a vowel. Okay, one very, very, very minor exception, and this will not apply throughout the range or to all people. But the only exception to tip of the tongue at the back of the bottom teeth on vowels is that sometimes for some singers on the vowel ooh in the low range, it can be more comfortable to slide the tip of the tongue down onto the gum line or even into that kind of soft, squishy well below the gums. The key here is it's still touching and the back of the tongue is kind of still staying high. So if you find as you come down in pitch, like on ooh, in order to keep the vowel clear, it may be helpful to slide the tip of the tongue down. But in my experience, that is the only exception to all vowels being sung from the position of the tip of the tongue against the back enamel of the bottom teeth. Okay, one more word about tongue position, and that is that the rest of the tongue, as a general rule, should stay inside that arc of the teeth. So some of my students joke about this and call it the fence of teeth or the tooth fence. Keep the tongue inside the tooth fence. What that means is that if you constantly feel like your tongue is spreading wide over your bottom teeth like this, you're probably getting kind of a woofy sound and some lack of clarity. So I would practice this on sounds like E and E. Are you able to make those vowels, keeping the tongue inside of that tooth fence? Give it a try. I think it's going to bring you a little more clarity. Okay, so if you've got your tongue in the right position, the next issue that you're going to want to think about is tension. Tongue tension is one of the principal problems of singing. It really affects almost every singer I've ever met. And so the good news is that putting your tongue in the proper position is going to help to remedy a lot of the tension. But I just want you to think a little bit about where tension in the tongue might occur and what it might feel like so that you can tackle it. And of course, next week, I'm going to show you some exercises specifically for doing that. But first, let's talk about where tongue tension occurs. The interesting thing is the tongue is actually made up of 8 muscles, intrinsic and extrinsic. So it's got muscles that kind of actually form its body. Interesting fact, there are 2 different directions of muscle fibers in the blade of the tongue, and they are woven, which makes the tongue capable of its incredible flexibility. So there are those intrinsic muscles, and then there are the extrinsic muscles, which are sort of like puppet strings that pull the tongue into its various positions. There can be tightness and over-helping in any of those muscles. So just when you think about finding tongue tension, it may not feel exactly like what you think. The first place I want you to look for it is actually at the way, way back. So if you can make this sound, way back there where you make that kind of cough sound, that is the very root of the tongue. And I want you to check there while you're singing. Is there any chance that there's kind of graveliness or a sense of tightening there, almost like a tickle in the throat? So if you can picture that your tongue kind of, this is the tip, and your tongue comes back in the mouth, and then it makes a 90-degree turn and goes down your throat. This kind of area, the kind of hump of the tongue and then where it goes down the throat, is where you're most likely to have tongue tension. So number one, this will be greatly helped, if not completely remedied, by keeping the tip of the tongue against those bottom teeth. However, if you're still experiencing problems with that, you can do kind of wiggling, or even just pay attention to that area of the tongue as you sing. I'll show you some great exercises next week for tackling it. But the other thing I want you to think about is not just, is that part of the tongue sort of tight, but generally, what is the texture of the tongue? So I'm sure that you are able to feel that your tongue can either be hard or soft in your mouth. And as you sing, the basic idea is that you want the tongue to be in all of its correct positions. So forward against the teeth, moving for consonants, moving into its shapes for vowels, but to do those positions while maintaining a soft texture. So the third thing I just want to cover in this deep dive of the tongue is its functionality, the jobs that it does for us. And you can think of this as kind of more the upside of the tongue, the reason why it's worth doing all the work to tackle the position and the tension problems. So the first job that the tongue has is, of course, in all of its speech work. So in order to speak clearly, we have to employ the tongue as well as the other articulators, the lips and the teeth. The other job that the tongue has, and this is kind of required more in singing than in speaking, is that the tongue acts as a sort of satellite dish in the mouth. We often talk on this channel about resonance and keeping the sound placed up high and forward in the mask. I'm sure you've heard high and forward. And so when we're trying to achieve that, it may seem counterintuitive to think about the tongue. But the truth is that a tongue that is placed in a released and angled position is going to act as a sort of satellite dish to kind of shoot that sound up and onto the hard palate where it is most resonant. So it's worth the hard work. Your tongue can do a lot of wonderful things for you, and frankly, you can't get along without it. So it's really worth learning how to manage your tongue. I can't wait to show you a bunch of exercises next week that will help you really feel more capable of managing the tongue independently. And in the meanwhile, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I know that I could talk about tongues all day long, but I really appreciate you taking the time to learn about them also, and I'll see you next week.